Bienvenidos a De Cabeza con Andrés Roemer. Hoy tenemos un gran debate, un debate milenario, pero con mentes brillantes que van a aportar muchas cosas nuevas a este gran problema filosófico. La pregunta del día de hoy, ¿es la religión buena para la humanidad? 4 distinguidas personalidades nos van a responder y van a debatir aquí de cabeza. Michael Sherman, welcome. You have 30 seconds. Tell us about your credentials. Who are you?
So I am the publisher of Skeptic Magazine and the director of the Skeptic Society. We're a nonprofit science education organization, and I'm also a professor at Chapman University, where I teach Skepticism 101, how to think like a scientist. And I've written a bunch of books. So The Moral Arc is my book probably most related to this particular topic, that is tracking moral progress, primarily driven, I argue, by science and reason, not by religion. So the topic of today is relevant to one of my chapters in that book.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Rabbi David Wolpe, please. You have the microphone. 30 seconds.
Thank you. My name is David Wolpe. I'm a rabbi in Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, and I also teach at a variety of universities. I've written a bunch of books. Again, as Michael pointed out, the one that's probably most relevant is one that's called Why Faith Matters, which has a chapter on science and religion. And for those of you who would like to read a book of a different sort, my most recent book was a biography of King David in the Yale University biography series, and I'm Andrés Roemer's third cousin.
Thank you very much. The great philosopher, Daniel Dennett, welcome. You have the microphone.
I'm Daniel Dennett. I'm a professor of philosophy at Tufts University, philosophy of cognitive science. In 2006, I published a book called Breaking the Spell, Religion as a Natural Phenomenon, where I argued that we need to understand religions as natural phenomena because that's what they are, and we need to understand them because of the role they play in the world, in politics, in sociology, in everything of that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel Dennett. Douglas, it's your turn. The microphone is yours.
Hi, Andres. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this discussion. My name is Douglas Guyvet. I teach philosophy at the graduate level at Biola University in Southern California. And my publications range across the spectrum of issues in philosophy of religion and knowledge about what is true or false in the domain of religious belief. And I have published a book called Being Good, Christian Virtue in Everyday Life.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, everybody that is watching this program, Michael and Dan believes and stands for the point that religion is bad for humanity, and David and Douglas believe the opposite. Each of you will have 2 minutes for your statement, your opening statement, and saying why you think the way you think. Michael, 2 minutes, please.
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's not a black and white question where we say religion is all bad or religion is all good. It's on a continuum rather than a binary choice. And on average, that is, say, over the centuries, I would argue that religion has not been a force for good in civilization. In fact, it's almost always lagging behind the kind of moral and cultural progress that we like to track and keep track of. Just a few reminders of some of the wars, the Crusades, the witch hunts, the Inquisition that ran from the Middle Ages to the early modern period, the endless European wars of religion, like the 9 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, the 80 Years' War, the French Wars of Religion, the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, the English Civil War, the American Civil War, the Northern Christians and Southern Christians slaughtered one another, the First World War, and so on. So if religion is such a force for good, why is it not prevented war? And in fact, why does it seem to accentuate it? And then in terms of like national identity, if you track statistically measures of societal health like homicides, suicides, teen pregnancies, STD rates, and so forth, other behaviors that are kind of related to moral values, the more religious the country is, the worse they do on these ratings. So while I would not argue that religion is bad for you or this individual or that individual, on average, for a country, for a whole nation of people, religions have always lagged behind and seem to have no effect on attenuating societal ill health. And then finally, if you look at the kind of moral progress we care about, the abolition of slavery, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, same-sex marriage rights, and so on, religions are always very slow to adopt these values, and they're primarily driven by reason
I'm sorry,
and science.
time. Thank you very much. Douglas, it's your timing. You have 2 minutes, please. What religion is good for humanity?
Yes, so this is a very important question. Is religion good for humanity, or has it been historically? And I agree with Michael Shermer when he says there is no real clear black and white on a question like this. But I might mean something a little differently than he does. The terms of the question are very complex. What do we mean by religion is one question. Not all of us would agree on what that is. Are we talking about religion in general or a particular religion? Are we talking about the difference between religion in cultural expression, or are we talking about the specific tenets of a religion? So that's an issue. Another question is, what are we talking about when we say humanity? Is it global? Is it historical? Are we talking about all of humanity on balance, or in terms of averages, like Michael has suggested? Or are we talking about individuals and how they experience religious reality? That's a question that needs to be addressed. Another question is, well, what do we mean by good? What counts as good for this or that individual or society? In what does good consist? And what grounds our understanding of the good? My view is that that for individuals and societies of individuals, collections of individuals, religion has been very good. It has been good for them, and their participation in the broader culture historically and in the present has also been good for society. Now, Michael gives really a litany of cases mentioning wars and rights violations and so forth that are supposed to be indicators that religion, I would say in a very, very general way, may have been difficult or been counterproductive, but this completely ignores the ways in which society has benefited.
Thank you very much, Douglas. You will have later more time. Dan, please, your turn.
I agree with both speakers about much of what they've said. I think religion probably was good for civilization at first. It was a sort of social glue, a superstition that held states together and stabilized societies until they could figure out more rational ways of doing things. And religions today are good for many people, especially for people who are otherwise have no meaning in their lives or are unloved, do not have any community. Community is a very good thing. And I wouldn't want to wrest from people who are desperate for community the solace and joy of being part of a group. But I think the price paid for religion is just too great. And the main price that bothers me is the price of truth. We have no sharp line between gentle, good diplomacy and hypocrisy. And what happens today, and more every day, is that the leaders of religious groups just have to talk hypocritically. They have to speak in code. They can't tell the truth, because as science has progressed, we now understand that the idea of a God like a human being, an anthropomorphic God, that's just hopeless. That was an ancient myth. That's no good. And the double talk that people in religions are obliged to speak poisons their souls and poisons the epistemological
time, but you will have more time later. David, your turn.
Okay, several points. First of all, almost every war that Michael cited was not actually a war of religion. The English Civil War is a perfect example. It was not actually a war of religion. The Scots and the English started the war, and it wasn't over religious issues, it was issues over parliament. Almost every war is because of money, resources, power, land. And it's very rare in human history that one group will say, oh, there's people on the other side of the world that believe something different, let's go kill them. That just doesn't happen. And if you look, in fact, in the Encyclopedia of War, which is the definitive source, under 7% of all wars in history have been attributed to religion. World War I, World War II, the Civil War, on and on and on. The Napoleonic Wars, the most destructive wars in history, have actually been when religion wanes, not when religion exists. That's point one. Point two is people in their daily lives live longer, are more civically active, give more to charity, including non-religious charities. On every social indices, people in religious communities do better than people who are not in religious communities. I say this because Dan is right. Community is important, but community actually doesn't get created out of nothing. It's generally out of deep shared traditions and beliefs, and those are the kinds of things that religious communities create. The biggest charities in the world tend to be religious charities. The largest charity in the United States is a religious charity. And the reason that's so is because religion mandates people to do things even against their self-interest that is good for other people. And when I've gone around the world, I've seen Christian aid workers in all sorts of countries spending years and years and years there when people in other organizations go for a year or two and then they leave. And then finally, I want to address the enforced hypocrisy. I am able to say exactly what I believe. When I think there's something in my own tradition I don't accept, I can say that. So it depends what religion we're talking about.
David, thank you very much. Each of you will have 1 minute just to have a dialogue and to say where there were, like David just did, where there are crimes against logic, why the facts are different of what the other people have said. We start again with you, Michael. 1 minute.
Right. So David's technically correct. My point is that if religion is supposed to be such a great force for moral progress, why is it unable to keep in check the violence of wars, for example, that may arise for other reasons? Of course, it's multi-causal. There's lots of reasons countries go to war. And the same thing with the other values I talked about, like teen pregnancy rates, abortion rates, STD rates, homicides, suicides, and so on. And I said the most religious countries have the more religious a country, the higher the rates of those societal ill health measures. I'm not claiming that suicides and homicides and STDs are caused by religion, but if religion is supposed to be such a great force for attenuating these negative forces in society, how come it's doing the worst it can in the most religious countries? That's my point. I don't think
Thank you very much. David, you have 1 minute. David Walt.
So I would say a couple of things. First of all, a lot depends on which country we're talking about and what kind of religion we're talking about. Second, I think that a lot of this has to do with your basic view of human nature. I see human nature as having good and evil qualities to it, things that are very difficult and very bad, and we tend to anathematize the other. You know, when a kid comes to a playground, the other kids don't go, oh, look, a new kid, let's embrace him and share our toys. No, it's like, let's get the new kid. And religion tries to overcome that otherness, but it is in its way a force multiplier. So it force multiplies good, and it sometimes force multiplies bad. And my biggest quarrel, and Michael and I have had the pleasure of going around this merry-go-round before, are there forms of religion that can actually lessen the negative impacts that religion has and heighten the positive impacts? And I deeply believe there are, and that those do exist.
Thank you very much. Dan, it's your turn. Crimes against logic.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So I would like to camp on 2 points that Dan mentioned. One has to do with truth and the other hypocrisy. And on the question of truth, we have to be clear about whether or not the moral questions raised by the religions of the world count as evidence for or against religious belief, or whether that's besides the point, whether religious belief is grounded some other way, and then we have to ask, what are the moral implications of that? I happen to believe that my own faith as a Christian, for example, is grounded in good evidence and good reasons that are compatible with the deliverances of science. And so if Christianity is true, then that is one good for humanity, is to be in a position to know what's true about ultimate reality. That would be something that is good for humanity, is the acquisition, the apprehension of fundamental truths that have implications for society. On the question of hypocrisy, I would say that any worldview is faced with this question, unless it's a worldview that has no moral point of view. And so a scientist who's a naturalist also has a conception
sorry,
of the world.
Douglas. I'm sorry. Dan, it's your turn. Daniel Dennett.
Yes. I've recently done a study with Linda Lascola of closeted atheist clergy of all faiths. We didn't do any Reformed Jews because they don't have to be in the closet. But in every other faith that we've looked at, here are people who trying to live good lives. They went into this for the best of reasons, certainly not for the money. And then they discover that they, day in and day out, have to say things they don't believe. And it eats away at them. And when they finally bare their souls to Linda Lascola, they feel a tremendous relief. I think that the clergy in the United States, the Clergy Project, which grew out of this, now has well over 1,000 members. These are active or former.
I'm sorry.
clergy.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, we will have just 1 minute to finish the program. I will make you a very quickly question. If you want, you could answer it, or you could talk about whatever you want for the conclusions. David, you mentioned that most of the studies, David Wolpe, show that people that belong to a religion, depends on the religion, but most of them live better lives, live longer, etc.
Yeah.
And that mention and talk about truth. Even imagine yourself that you could live longer and probably happier under some drugs or alcohol or whatever, but you are not actually living in reality. For many people, to believe and to belong to a religion could be like, okay, I'm happier, but probably you're living in a scenario like Robert Nozick would tell you that it's not true. What would you say about that?
Right. No, I think that Nozick's point is powerful. It's also the basis of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and I'm on the side of the savage in that novel. No, I want truth, and I would not want to compromise it. But I would say this: I really do believe that a world governed entirely by a scientific ethic is a world that there are with horrendous problems and issues, and a world that is governed by any kind of religion that ignores science equally so. So I'm reminded of an old Hasidic story, and I'll stop with this, about a man who's lost in the forest, and he finds another man. He says, "Oh, thank God I found you, because I'm totally lost." And the other man says, "I'm lost too." He says, "But one thing I do know is the way I have gone so far is not the way. So take my hand and let's find the way together." I would say that those who are believers and those who have a scientific ethic need each other to find the way together.
Thank you very much. Michael, very quickly, there is a big debate most of the times that moral and religion, that you need to have moral if you really want to have it, you need to be part of religion, which I know on your perspective, that's absolutely false. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Of course, most religious people like Doug and David would agree. You personally, or me, or this guy or that guy, they don't necessarily need religion to be moral. They could be good people. Their argument is on average across the board, religion leads people to be more moral. My counter to that is at the same level. That if you look at the great civil rights movements, the abolition of slavery and torture, and the elimination of capital punishment, and civil rights, women's rights, and same-sex marriage rights, religion has always lagged behind the wave of change. And even though you can find anecdotes or single people like Wilberforce, or a single religion like the Quakers that agitated for the abolition of slavery, their opponents were their fellow Christians. It was their fellow religionists who argued in favor of slavery using the Bible as justification. Same thing with same-sex marriage. We saw that so recently that, you know, it was always the most religious people agitating against it, and now they've stopped talking about it.
Thank you very much. Douglas, at the beginning, in your opening statement, you mentioned that, well, we're talking about religion, but what kind of religion? What do we mean by good? What do we mean by humanity, etc.? My question for you is, which religion, in your perspective, or what kind of religion is really not good for humanity? And by good, I mean that it makes harm. And humanity, I mean the people that believe on it, or people that do not belong to it, but are affected by those people of that religion.
Well, that's a difficult question for me to answer. I'd rather not speak for other religions so much as to speak on behalf of my own view, which is in a Judeo-Christian context, and about the goods that are produced within that framework. Time is so limited, I'd rather not be talking about other religions that have the other problems. I'd like to go back to something that Dan said about hypocrisy and truth. It was very interesting that he gave an example of atheists who are clerics or clergy within religious traditions. And these are people who don't believe what they're teaching other people and what they're supposed to teach. They could leave those religious traditions, but they stay where they are until the pressure gets too great. Are these people themselves hypocrites? My point would simply be that hypocrisy is a human problem. It is not a unique problem for religious people. It's a problem also for the scientific naturalists.
Thank you very much. Dan, if you could elaborate a little bit about science and religion and why one cannot go with the other, or probably could they go together, like Douglas have mentioned it, please.
First, I simply disagree with Douglas about his parallel with hypocrisy and science. I think science is the one institution ever in the planet where self-criticism and criticism of others and candor is highly valued, and hypocrisy is really ruled out pretty much. I find it interesting that when religions want to establish that some of the truths of their faith, they'll go to science and ask them to look at the Shroud of Turin or to examine artifacts. They'll look at science for vindication. You'll never see science going to the Pope and asking whether or not one theory is right or another, because religions have simply no authority at all about factual matters. Not a word in the Bible is authoritative relative.
I'm sorry, Daniel.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Amazing. Thank you very much to all of you. We need 3 hours of program to, I was like,
Yes.
please keep talking, please keep going, talking, etc. And it's always an honor to see the four of you. And thank you very much to be with us today. And
Thank
have
you.
a great night. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye. Gracias. Bye-bye.
Well done. Good to see you.
Señoras y señores, gran programón. Algo muy interesante del cerebro humano es que por lo general, cuando entramos en debates como estos, la gente no cambia de opinión, refuerza sus prejuicios. Bien dice Einstein que es más difícil romper un prejuicio que destruir un átomo. ¿Qué posturas que van en contra de cómo nosotros pensamos nos hacen pensar, dudar y cuestionarnos a nosotros mismos? De cabeza, mente crítica. Muchísimas gracias. Quédense aquí en ADN 40. Buenas noches.